When a pregnant woman collapses in a dingy New York diner, she has no idea the man she's been hiding from for 5 months is closer than she thinks, and that her daughter has just stopped moving. Lena Hart thought she could survive on pride and silence, but her body has other plans. What happens when the dangerous man who never stopped searching for her walks into her hospital room? When his enemies discover the child she's carrying? When survival means surrendering to the very world she tried to escape? Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels. The fluorescent lights of the Metro diner flickered with their usual epileptic rhythm, casting sickly yellow shadows across cracked vinyl booths and grease-stained linoleum. The air hung thick with the smell of burnt coffee, cheap bacon, and decades of accumulated desperation. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late September, and Lena Hart was on hour 13 of what was supposed to be a double shift, but had stretched into something closer to a marathon of survival. Her feet screamed inside shoes that had given up their structural integrity 3 weeks ago. Her lower back throbbed with a deep, persistent ache that radiated down her legs and made every step feel like wading through concrete. But it was the hollowness in her stomach, the gnawing, relentless hunger that she'd learned to ignore, that worried her most. Not for herself. She'd gone hungry before, back when she was clawing her way up through the ranks of New York's fashion scene, surviving on black coffee and ambition. No, the hunger worried her because of the life growing inside her. 5 months now. 5 months of hiding, of pretending, of wearing oversized uniforms and positioning herself behind counters so no one would notice the swell of her belly. 5 months since that night, since him. Lena's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach as she refilled coffee for a trucker at the counter, the gesture so habitual now that she barely registered it. The baby, her daughter, the ultrasound had confirmed, usually responded to touch with a flutter, a gentle reassurance that despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the fear and the bone-deep loneliness, they were in this together. But tonight, there was nothing. Lena's breath caught. She pressed harder, waiting, still nothing. The coffee pot shook in her hand, sending dark liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You all right there, sweetheart?" The trucker's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Fine," Lena managed, her voice steady despite the ice spreading through her veins. "Just tired." She'd been saying that a lot lately. Just tired. As if tired explained the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. As if tired explained why she sometimes had to grip the counter to keep from swaying. As if tired was an adequate description for what happened when your entire life collapsed in the span of a single night and you had to rebuild it from scratch while growing a human being inside you. 6 months ago, Lena Hart had been someone. Assistant designer at Mercer and Klein, one of Manhattan's rising fashion houses. Her sketches had caught the eye of Helena Mercer herself, the notoriously difficult creative director who rarely acknowledged anyone below senior designer level. Lena had been on track for promotion. Her portfolio was strong. Her future was bright. Then came the gallery opening. Lena pushed the memory away as she moved to table 7, where a couple who'd obviously had too much to drink were giggling over disco fries. She didn't let herself think about that night anymore. The way the champagne had tasted, the way the city lights had looked from the penthouse terrace, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in a room full of Manhattan's elite, the way everything had felt possible. "More coffee?" she asked the couple, her waitress smile firmly in place. The woman waved her off, too busy whispering something to her companion. They looked happy, uncomplicated, like people whose biggest problem was whether to order another round of fries. Lena envied them with an intensity that made her chest ache. She was halfway back to the coffee station when the first wave of dizziness hit. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet, the fluorescent light suddenly too bright, too harsh. She caught herself on the edge of a booth, her knuckles white against the red vinyl. "Just tired," she whispered to herself. "You're just tired." But her body was done listening to lies. The second wave brought her to her knees. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in an explosion of glass and scalding liquid. Somewhere far away she heard shouting, felt hands grabbing at her. The world had narrowed to a pinpoint of consciousness, and even that was fading fast. Her last coherent thought before the darkness took her was of the baby. Her daughter. The flutter of movement she hadn't felt in hours. Please, she thought, please be okay. Then there was nothing. The emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital was a symphony of controlled chaos. Monitors beeped in sterile rhythm. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Doctors barked orders in the particular shorthand of people who dealt with crisis on an hourly basis. Lena surfaced from unconsciousness in stages, each layer of awareness bringing new information. The smell of antiseptic, the scratchy texture of hospital sheets, the insistent beeping of machines she couldn't identify, and underneath it all, a bone-deep exhaustion that made her previous fatigue seem like a gentle suggestion. Her hand moved to her stomach before her eyes opened. Still there, still round, but still. "The baby," she croaked, her throat raw. "Is the baby?" "Easy." A gentle hand pressed against her shoulder. "Easy, Ms. Hart. Your daughter is fine. Her heartbeat is strong." Lena's eyes snapped open. The nurse standing beside her bed was middle-aged, with kind eyes, and the kind of calm demeanor that came from years of delivering news, both good and bad. Behind her, an IV stand dripped clear fluid into Lena's arm. Monitors displayed numbers that meant nothing to Lena but apparently satisfied the medical professionals. "She's okay?" Lena's voice broke on the question. "She's really okay?" "She's a fighter," the nurse said with a small smile. "Takes after her mother, I'd guess." The relief was so overwhelming that Lena felt tears spill down her cheeks before she could stop them. She never cried. Not when she'd lost her job, not when she'd had to move out of her apartment, not during the endless nights at the diner when her feet bled and her back screamed and she wanted nothing more than to give up. But this, the knowledge that her daughter was safe, broke something in her. "However," the nurse continued, her expression growing serious, "we need to talk about you." Lena wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together. "I'm fine. Just tired. I can go back to—" "You're severely malnourished," the nurse interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "Dehydrated, anemic. Your blood pressure is dangerously low. When was the last time you had a proper meal or a full night's sleep?" Lena couldn't remember. Days blurred together when you were working doubles, sleeping in shifts, living on whatever food you could steal from the diner's kitchen when the manager wasn't looking. "I'm managing," she said instead. "You collapsed." The nurse pulled up a chair, settling beside the bed with the air of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. "You collapsed in the middle of a shift, and you're lucky, very lucky, that you didn't hurt yourself or your baby. Ms. Hart, you can't keep living like this. Your body is shutting down." "I don't have a choice." The words came out sharper than Lena intended. "I don't have insurance. I don't have savings. I have a job that pays under the table and an apartment that's really just a room with a hot plate. So managing is all I can do." The nurse's expression softened with something that looked like pity, and Lena hated it. She didn't want pity. Pity didn't pay bills or put food in your stomach or prepare you for a baby you hadn't planned and couldn't afford, but somehow, impossibly, wanted more than anything. "The doctor will want to keep you for observation," the nurse said. "At least overnight. We need to get some nutrition into you, stabilize your blood pressure. After that," she hesitated. "After that, we'll talk about resources. There are programs that can help." Lena nodded, too tired to argue. Charity. That's what she'd become. The girl who'd once sketched designs for New York Fashion Week, now dependent on government programs and the kindness of overworked social workers. The fall from grace hadn't just been swift. It had been absolute. The nurse left with promises to check back soon, and Lena was alone with the beeping monitors and her spiraling thoughts. She stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in the acoustic panels, trying not to think about how she'd pay for this. The hospital would want insurance information she didn't have. They'd want an address that wasn't a converted storage room in Washington Heights. They'd want the father's name, and that was where everything got complicated. Because Lena knew his name. Knew it the way you know things that have been burned into your consciousness. Victor Moretti. She'd Googled him exactly once, the morning after that night at the gallery, and what she'd found had made her blood run cold. Not a businessman, as he'd claimed. Or at least, not the legal kind. The articles had used careful language. Alleged. Suspected. Sources say. But the picture they painted was clear enough. Victor Moretti was connected. Powerful. Dangerous. The kind of man who showed up in news stories about federal investigations and mysterious disappearances and organized crime. The kind of man who could destroy what was left of her life without even trying. So she'd run, blocked his number, changed her routine, lost herself in the anonymity of New York's service industry, where people came and went and no one asked too many questions if you showed up on time and didn't steal from the register. She'd thought she was safe. Ms. Hart? The voice was male, professional, and came from the doorway. Lena turned her head to see a doctor entering the room, his white coat pristine, his expression serious. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen," he said, pulling up the chair the nurse had vacated. "I'm the attending physician tonight. I've reviewed your case, and I have some concerns." "The baby is fine," Lena said quickly. The nurse said, "Your daughter is stable for now," Dr. Chen interrupted. "But Ms. Hart, your condition is serious. The malnutrition alone would be concerning, but combined with your work schedule, your living situation," he paused, "you're putting both lives at risk." Lena's jaw tightened. "I'm doing the best I can." "I know," his voice softened, "and I'm not here to judge. But I am here to tell you that if you continue on this path, the outcome could be catastrophic. Premature labor, developmental issues for the baby, or worse." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Lena felt her throat constrict. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. "Wave a magic wand and make everything better? I'm one person, working one job, trying to survive. That's all I can do." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, "What about the father?" Every muscle in Lena's body went rigid. "What about him? Is he in the picture? Could he provide support?" "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp. "He's not. He can't be involved." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why?" "Because he's dangerous," Lena wanted to say. "Because I'm terrified of what he might do if he found out about this baby. Because 6 months ago, I made the mistake of believing in fairy tales, and I won't make that mistake again." "It's complicated," she said instead. "Ms. Hart." "I said no." Lena met his gaze, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. "The father is not an option. Whatever I need to do, I'll figure it out myself." Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment, and Lena had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen, really seen. Like he could read all the secrets she was trying so desperately to hide. "All right," he said finally. "We'll focus on getting you stabilized. But Ms. Hart, I want you to think about something. Pride is a luxury. And right now, you can't afford luxuries." "But..." He left before Lena could respond, and she was alone again with the monitors and the fear and the growing certainty that her carefully constructed walls were about to come crashing down. She didn't know how right she was. Dr. Marcus Chen had been practicing medicine for 37 years. In that time, he'd seen just about everything the human condition had to offer, the best and the worst, the miraculous and the tragic. He'd learned to maintain professional distance, to see patients as cases rather than people, because getting emotionally involved was a fast track to burnout. But there was something about Lena Hart that bothered him. It wasn't just the medical situation, though that was concerning enough. It was the way she'd reacted when he'd mentioned the father, the flash of fear in her eyes before she'd locked it down, the too quick denial. He'd seen that look before, in women fleeing abusive partners, in victims of trafficking, in people who'd learned that survival sometimes meant becoming invisible. Back in his office, Chen pulled up Lena's file on his computer. Standard intake forms, mostly blank. No permanent address listed, just a mailbox number in Washington Heights. No emergency contact, no insurance. Under father of baby, she'd written N/A in firm, decisive letters. Chen sat back in his chair, drumming his fingers against the desk. It wasn't his job to pry into patients' personal lives, but it was his job to ensure they received adequate care, and Lena Hart was on a collision course with disaster. His eyes drifted to the photograph on his desk. His daughter, Emily, at her medical school graduation. She'd be about Lena's age now, late 20s, maybe early 30s. If Emily were in trouble, Chen would want someone to help. to look beyond the professional boundaries and see the human being struggling underneath. The thought made him look at Lena's file again. This time, something caught his attention. Under previous address, she'd listed an apartment in Chelsea. Expensive neighborhood. The kind of place you didn't live unless you had money. Chen pulled up a browser and typed in Lena's name. The search results were sparse but telling. A few mentions in fashion industry newsletters. An article from New York Magazine about rising stars in fashion design from 2 years ago, featuring a photograph of a younger, happier Lena Hart holding a sketch pad. Another article about a charity fashion show she'd helped organize. And then, about 6 months ago, the trail went cold. Chen frowned. It wasn't unusual for people to disappear from public view, but the timing was interesting. 6 months ago, right around when Lena would have gotten pregnant. Right around when something had gone catastrophically wrong in her life. He was about to close the browser when another search result caught his eye. A society page photo from a gallery opening, dated exactly 6 months ago. The image showed Manhattan's elite mingling over champagne and canapes. In the background, partially obscured by other guests, was a woman who looked like Lena. She was laughing at something someone off camera had said, her face open and unguarded in a way that was completely unlike the defensive, exhausted woman currently lying in his ER. Chen enlarged the image, squinting at the screen. The photo quality wasn't great, but he could make out Lena's distinctive features. And beside her, his face turned slightly toward the camera, was a man Chen recognized, Victor Moretti. Chen's blood ran cold. He'd lived in New York long enough to know the name. You couldn't follow local news without encountering stories about the Moretti family, always carefully worded, always mindful of libel laws, but clear enough in their implications. The Morettis weren't just wealthy, they were connected. The kind of connected that made prosecutors nervous and witnesses disappear. Victor Moretti was the youngest of 3 sons, and by all accounts the most dangerous. While his older brothers played at respectability, running legitimate businesses that everyone knew were fronts, Victor operated in the shadows. The FBI had tried to build cases against him for years and gotten nowhere. He was smart, careful, ruthless when necessary. And apparently, 6 months ago, he'd been at a gallery opening with Lena Hart. Chen sat back in his chair, his mind racing. This changed everything. If Victor Moretti was the father, and the timing certainly suggested he might be, then Lena's fear made a lot more sense. She wasn't just trying to survive poverty, she was trying to stay hidden from one of the most powerful men in New York. But why? Had Moretti hurt her, threatened her, or had she simply run when she realized what kind of world she'd stumbled into? Chen's first instinct was to let it go, to treat Lena, discharge her with instructions to rest and eat properly, and send her back out into whatever life she was trying to build. It wasn't his place to interfere. He was a doctor, not a detective or a social worker. But then he thought about his daughter again, about the kind of help he'd want someone to offer if she were in trouble. And he thought about Victor Moretti and the resources that kind of man could bring to bear. Resources that could ensure a pregnant woman received proper medical care. Resources that could mean the difference between survival and tragedy. Chen picked up his phone, stared at it for a long moment, then set it down again. This was a terrible idea. Probably the worst idea he'd had in his entire career. Interfering in the lives of dangerous men never ended well. But doing nothing felt worse. He picked up the phone again, this time dialing a number he'd hoped never to use. It rang 3 times before a smooth, professional voice answered. Moretti Enterprises. How may I direct your call? Chen took a deep breath. I need to speak with Victor Moretti. Tell him it's about Lena Hart. There was a pause, then, please hold. As Chen waited, listening to generic hold music, he wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if possibly he'd just saved 2 lives that desperately needed saving. He was about to find out. Victor Moretti was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with a priority notification. He ignored it at first. The men sitting around his office conference table represented 3 different factions of his business empire, and getting them to agree on anything required his full attention. The shipment routes through Baltimore need to be renegotiated, Marco Vitale was saying, his thick fingers drumming against the mahogany table. The Port Authority is asking questions. Then we find new routes, Victor replied, his voice calm despite the headache building behind his eyes. We've operated through Newark before. It's slower but cleaner. Slower means more expensive, another man pointed out. The clients won't like delays. The clients will like federal investigations even less. Victor's phone buzzed again. Same priority level. He frowned. His assistant knew better than to interrupt unless it was truly urgent. Gentlemen, excuse me for a moment. He stood, pulling the phone from his pocket as he stepped away from the table. The message on his screen made his blood freeze. Urgent. Hospital called. Regarding Lena Hart. Victor's fingers tightened around the phone. For 6 months, he'd had people searching. Private investigators, police contacts, everyone he could leverage without drawing too much attention. For 6 months, Lena had been a ghost, vanished so completely that even his considerable resources couldn't find her. And now a hospital was calling. He stepped into his private office, closing the door behind him. What hospital? He demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. His assistant's voice was steady, professional. Mount Sinai, a Dr. Marcus Chen. He said it was urgent. Transfer him, now, the line clicked over. Mr. Moretti? An older man's voice, careful but firm. Who is this? Victor kept his voice level, giving nothing away. And how did you get this number? My name is Dr. Marcus Chen. I'm an attending physician at Mount Sinai Hospital. Mr. Moretti, I'm calling about a patient of mine, Lena Hart. I believe you know her. Victor's jaw clenched. Is she hurt? She collapsed from malnutrition and exhaustion. She's stable now, but Dr. Chen paused. Mr. Moretti, she's pregnant, about 5 months along, and she's been living in conditions that are putting both her life and the baby's life at risk. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Pregnant. 5 months. The timeline fit perfectly with that night. The gallery opening, the conversation that had stretched into hours, the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth knowing instead of someone to fear. The way she'd disappeared without a trace the next morning. Where is she? Victor's voice came out rough, unfamiliar. Mount Sinai, Emergency Department. Mr. Moretti, I want to be clear about something. I'm violating patient confidentiality by calling you. I could lose my license, but I'm looking at a young woman who's killing herself trying to survive, and I have reason to believe you might be the father of her child. If I'm wrong, you're not wrong. Victor was already moving, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let her leave. Mr. Moretti, she doesn't want you involved. She made that very clear. I don't care what she wants. The words came out harsher than intended. Victor forced himself to take a breath, to think past the roaring in his ears. Dr. Chen, is the baby mine? I can't confirm that without, is the baby mine? A pause, then quietly, based on the timing and her reaction when I asked about the father, I believe so, yes. Victor closed his eyes. A baby. His baby. And Lena had been facing this alone for 5 months, working herself to death in some desperate attempt to survive without him. Keep her there, he said again. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, I'll handle it. Just don't let her leave before I get there. He ended the call and stood for a moment in the silence of his office, trying to process what he'd just learned. Then he strode back into the conference room where 3 men were still arguing about shipping routes. We're done, Victor announced. Marco, handle the Baltimore situation however you see fit. Everyone out. The men exchanged glances but knew better than to argue when Victor used that tone. They filed out quickly, leaving him alone. Victor pulled out his phone again, this time calling his head of security. Dominic, I need a car. Now. And I need you to pull everything we have on Mount Sinai Hospital's security. Exits, protocols, everything. Problem? Dominic's voice was alert, professional. Potential complication. I'll explain on the way. Victor was already heading for the private elevator that would take him directly to the parking garage. And Dominic? This one's personal. Absolute discretion. Understood, boss. As Victor rode down in the elevator, his mind raced through possibilities and implications. Lena was pregnant with his child. She'd been hiding for 5 months, living in poverty rather than reach out to him. The question was why? Had someone threatened her? Had she learned about his business and run in fear? Or had something else happened that night? Something he'd missed in his own careful planning? 6 months ago, Victor had walked into a gallery opening expecting a boring evening of champagne and pretentious art discussions. What he'd found instead was Lena, sharp, funny, completely unimpressed by his wealth or status. They'd talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She'd made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years, made him feel human instead of like the dangerous legacy he'd inherited. He'd wanted to see her again, had planned to call her the next day, to take things slow and careful because something about her had felt important, worth protecting. Instead, he'd woken to find her gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty apartment and a growing certainty that she'd run from him deliberately. Now he knew why. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage, where Dominic was already waiting beside a black Mercedes, engine running. "Mount Sinai," Victor said, sliding into the back seat. "Fast but clean, no attention." Dominic nodded and pulled out into traffic. As they drove through Manhattan's evening streets, Victor stared out the window and thought about Lena, about the baby, about the future that had just crashed into his carefully ordered world. He'd spent 6 months looking for her, 6 months wondering what he'd done wrong, why she'd left, if he'd ever see her again. Now he had answers. And now, whether Lena liked it or not, everything was about to change, because Victor Moretti protected what was his. And that baby, his daughter, if the timeline was right, was his in the most fundamental way possible. No matter what Lena thought she was running from, she was about to learn that some things couldn't be outrun, especially not family. The 23 minutes it took to reach Mount Sinai felt like hours. Victor sat in the back of the Mercedes, his jaw tight, his mind cycling through scenarios. Dominic drove with practiced efficiency, weaving through Manhattan traffic without drawing attention, but every red light felt like an eternity. "Boss," Dominic said quietly, his eyes meeting Victor's in the rear-view mirror. "What's the situation?" Victor hesitated. Dominic had been with him for 8 years, had proven his loyalty a dozen times over. But this was different. This was personal in a way that made Victor's usual careful control feel fragile. "The woman from 6 months ago," Victor said finally. "Lena Hart. She's at Mount Sinai. She's been hiding from me." Dominic's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "The one you had us looking for?" "Yes." Victor paused. "She's pregnant. The baby's mine." Now Dominic's eyebrows rose. In all the years he'd worked for Victor, through all the violence and chaos and impossible situations, he'd never looked surprised. Until now. "Congratulations," Dominic said carefully. "Does she know you're coming?" "No, and according to the doctor who called me, she doesn't want me involved." Victor's voice hardened. "That's going to change." "Want me to secure the exits? Make sure she can't leave?" Victor considered it. His first instinct was yes. Lock down the hospital. Make it impossible for Lena to disappear again. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of how she'd looked at him that night at the gallery, like he was someone she could trust. Maybe it was the knowledge that forcing her hand would only confirm whatever fears had made her run in the first place. "No," he said. "We do this carefully. I want to know why she ran. I want to understand what happened. And then? And then I fix it." Victor's tone left no room for argument. "Whatever it takes." They pulled up to Mount Sinai's main entrance. Victor was out of the car before it fully stopped, Dominic falling into step behind him. The emergency department was busy. Crying children, exhausted parents, the controlled chaos of a New York hospital on a weeknight. Victor ignored it all, moving with purpose toward the reception desk. The nurse behind the counter looked up, saw him, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or just the instinctive awareness that came when someone dangerous entered your space. "I'm here to see Lena Hart," Victor said. "Dr. Chen is expecting me." The nurse's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. "Are you family?" "I'm the father of her child." The words felt strange on his tongue. True, but surreal. "Dr. Chen called me." The nurse picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it, then nodded. "Dr. Chen will meet you. Please wait here." Victor forced himself to stand still, to project calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Dominic positioned himself nearby, his eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing threats and exits with the automatic precision of someone who'd spent his entire adult life keeping dangerous men alive. Dr. Chen appeared within minutes, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with shrewd eyes that took in everything about Victor in a single glance. His expression was carefully neutral, but Victor saw the wariness underneath. "Mr. Moretti!" Chen extended a hand. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Victor shook it, noting the firm grip. "Where is she?" "Before I take you to her, we need to talk." Chen gestured toward a small consultation room off the main corridor. "Privately." Victor glanced at Dominic, who nodded and stepped back. The consultation room was standard hospital issue. White walls, uncomfortable chairs, a box of tissues on the small table that had seen too many difficult conversations. Chen closed the door and turned to face Victor directly. "I want to be very clear about something," Chen said. "I called you because I believe that baby deserves a chance at life, and Lena Hart is killing herself trying to provide it alone. But I also need to know that I didn't just put her in danger. I would never hurt her." The words came out sharper than Victor intended. Intentionally, perhaps not. "But Mr. Moretti, I know who you are. I know what your family does. And I need to understand why a woman would choose poverty and starvation over accepting help from the father of her child." Victor's jaw clenched. "That's what I'm here to find out. Is there any reason she should be afraid of you?" "No." Victor met Chen's gaze steadily. "That night, the night we met, I thought we had something, a connection. I wanted to see her again. When I woke up and she was gone, I assumed I'd misread the situation. I had people looking for her, but quietly. I didn't want to scare her. And now? Now I know she's been working herself to death at some dive diner, living in conditions that put her and my daughter at risk, all to avoid me." Victor's hands clenched into fists. "So no, doctor, she shouldn't be afraid of me. But she clearly is, and I need to know why." Chen studied him for a long moment. "Her condition is serious. The malnutrition has affected her blood pressure, her iron levels, her overall health. If she continues like this, she could go into premature labor, or worse. What does she need? Rest, proper nutrition, prenatal care, a safe place to live." Chen paused. "And probably therapy to deal with whatever trauma made her think running was safer than asking for help." Victor nodded slowly. "She'll have all of it, whatever it costs. Mr. Moretti, it's not about money. It's about trust. If you storm in there demanding things, making decisions for her, you'll only confirm whatever fears sent her running in the first place. Then what do you suggest? Talk to her, listen, find out what she needs, not just what you think she needs." Chen's expression softened slightly. "And be prepared for the possibility that what she needs is space." Victor wanted to argue, to insist that space was the last thing Lena needed when she was barely surviving. But Chen was right. Pushing too hard would only drive her further away. "Where is she?" Victor asked again. "Exam room 4. She's awake, stable. The IV is helping with the dehydration." Chen moved toward the door, then paused. "Mr. Moretti, one more thing. If you're going to be part of this, you need to be all in. Lena Hart doesn't strike me as someone who will accept half measures. Either you commit to being there for her and that baby, or you walk away now and let her figure it out herself." "I'm not walking away." Victor's voice was absolute. "That's my child. And Lena—" He stopped, searching for the right words. "She deserves better than what she's been doing to herself." Chen nodded and opened the door. "Then let's hope you can convince her of that." The walk to exam room 4 felt longer than the entire drive to the hospital. Victor's heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with danger or violence, and everything to do with the knowledge that behind that door was a woman he hadn't been able to forget and a future he hadn't seen coming. Chen knocked softly, then pushed open the door. "Ms. Hart, there's someone here to see you." Victor stepped into the room and saw her. 6 months had changed her. The confident, vibrant woman from the gallery opening was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been fighting a war and losing. She was thinner than he remembered, dangerously so, except for the unmistakable curve of her belly beneath the hospital gown. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair, which had been glossy and perfectly styled that night, hung limp around her face. But her eyes, those same sharp, intelligent eyes, went wide with shock when she saw him. Then they filled with something that looked like terror. "No," Lena whispered. "No, no, no. How did you—" She turned to Dr. Chen, her voice rising. You called him? You had no right. Ms. Hart, Chen began, get out. Lena's hands moved protectively to her stomach. Both of you, get out right now. Victor raised his hands in a placating gesture, fighting every instinct that told him to move closer, to take control of the situation. Lena, please. I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about. Her voice shook, but her expression was fierce. I don't know what he told you, but you need to leave. Now. I know about the baby. Victor kept his voice level, gentle in a way he rarely used. I know she's mine. Something flickered across Lena's face. Grief, maybe, or resignation. She's not yours. She's mine. You don't get to claim her just because you figured out I exist. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing, Victor? Lena's voice cracked. What do you want from me? I want to understand why you left. Victor took a careful step closer. I want to know what I did that made you think disappearing was better than giving me a chance. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really don't know? You really think I just woke up one morning and decided to throw away everything for no reason? Then tell me, help me understand. Dr. Chen, Lena said, not taking her eyes off Victor. Please leave. This conversation needs to happen without an audience. Chen glanced between them, clearly torn. Ms. Hart, I don't think I can handle this. Lena's voice was steel. Please. Chen nodded reluctantly and left, closing the door behind him. The sudden silence felt thick, dangerous. Victor could see Lena's pulse racing in her throat, could see the way her hands trembled despite her brave front. I Googled you, Lena said finally. The morning after. I wanted to know more about the man who'd made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. And you know what I found? Victor's jaw tightened. He could imagine. What did you find? Federal investigations, organized crime connections, articles about your family's business interests that were very careful not to make any direct accusations. Lena's eyes blazed. You told me you were an import-export. You didn't mention that what you import and export comes with body bags. That's not fair. Fair? Lena's voice rose. You lied to me, Victor. You made me think you were someone I could trust, someone safe. And then I found out that being with you meant being part of a world where people disappear and prosecutors lose cases and nobody asks too many questions. I never lied to you. Victor fought to keep his voice steady. I told you exactly what I do. Import-export. That's the truth. It's also the truth that you left out the part about being connected to the mob. I'm not... Victor stopped, ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. No, it's not. Lena's voice dropped to something quiet and broken. It's very simple. You're dangerous. The life you lead is dangerous. And I couldn't bring a child into that. I wouldn't. So you chose poverty instead? You chose to work yourself to death rather than let me help? I chose to keep my daughter safe. Lena's hand pressed against her stomach. I chose to give her a chance at a normal life, away from violence and crime and all the things that come with your world. And how's that working out for you? Victor regretted the words immediately, but they were out. You collapsed from starvation, Lena. The doctor says you're at risk of premature labor. Is that the safety you chose? Lena's face crumpled. For a moment, Victor thought she might cry. Instead, she took a shaking breath and pulled herself together with visible effort. I'm doing my best, she said quietly. It's all I can do. It's not enough. Victor moved closer until he was standing beside the hospital bed. And you know it's not enough. That's why you look terrified every time you touch your stomach and don't feel her move. That's why you're in this hospital right now instead of at work. What do you want me to say? Lena's voice broke. That I failed? That I can't do this alone? Fine. You're right, I can't. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you swoop in and take over like some kind of savior. I don't need saving, Victor. I need you to leave me alone. I can't do that. Yes, you can. You just don't want to. You're carrying my child, Victor's voice was rough. My daughter. And you expect me to just walk away? To let you struggle when I have the resources to help? Your resources come with strings. Lena met his gaze. They come with expectations and control and a life I don't want. What life do you want? Victor asked. This one? Working doubles at a diner for under-the-table pay, living in some room that probably doesn't even have heat, lying awake at night wondering if you'll have enough money for food? At least it's my choice. It's not a choice. It's survival. There's a difference. Lena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small. What happened to us, Victor? That night at the gallery. I thought I knew you. I thought you were someone I could care about, and then I found out it was all a lie. It wasn't a lie. Victor pulled up the chair Chen had used earlier and sat down, bringing himself to Lena's eye level. Everything I told you that night was true. My favorite restaurant. My hatred of pretentious art. The story about my mother's garden. He paused. How I felt when I looked at you. Don't. Lena's eyes glistened. Don't do that. Don't make this about feelings when we both know it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because feelings don't change what you are. They don't change the life you lead or the choices you make. Lena's voice wavered. I saw the articles, Victor. I saw the pictures of crime scenes and federal raids. I saw enough to know that caring about you means accepting a world I can't accept. What if I told you those articles don't tell the whole story? Then I'd say you're lying again. Lena wiped at her eyes angrily. I'm not stupid. I know what your family does. I know what it means to be a Moretti in New York, and I won't raise my daughter in that. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You're right. My family has a history, a complicated, often dark history. But Lena, I've been trying to change that, to build something different. By doing what? Becoming a legitimate businessman overnight? Lena's laugh was bitter. That's not how this works. No, it's not. It's a process. A long, difficult process that I started 3 years ago. Victor held her gaze. Why do you think the FBI hasn't been able to build a case against me? It's not because I'm clever at hiding things. It's because there's nothing recent to find. Lena stared at him. I don't believe you. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to let me prove it. Victor reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his hand over hers where it rested on her stomach. I'm asking you to give me a chance to be the father our daughter deserves. Lena looked down at their hands. And if you can't walk away from your family's business, then you'll have every right to walk away from me. Victor's voice was steady. But Lena, regardless of what happens between us, you can't keep living like this. You heard what the doctor said. You're putting both lives at risk. I don't have another option. Yes, you do. Victor squeezed her hand gently. You have me. You have my resources, my protection, everything I can offer. No strings, no expectations, just help. There are always strings with people like you. People like me. Victor's voice hardened slightly. You mean people who come from complicated families? People who've made mistakes but are trying to do better? Or do you mean people who would do anything to protect the people they care about? Lena pulled her hand away. I mean people who think money and power can solve everything, who think they can control situations by controlling resources. Is that what you think I'm trying to do? Control you? Aren't you? Victor sat back studying her. She looked exhausted, scared, and so damn stubborn that he wanted to shake her and hold her at the same time. What would convince you that I'm not trying to control you? What would it take for you to trust me? I don't know if you can. Lena's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can trust anyone right now, Victor. Everything I thought I knew 6 months ago turned out to be wrong. My job, my future, my understanding of who you were, all of it fell apart. And now you're asking me to believe in you again when I barely believe in myself. The raw honesty in her voice cut through Victor's frustration. He'd been so focused on fixing the situation, on using his resources to make everything better, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have your whole world collapse, to lose everything you thought was certain. Tell me what happened, he said quietly. After you left, tell me how you ended up here. Lena was silent for so long that Victor thought she might refuse. Then slowly, she began to speak. I lost my job 3 days after that night with you. Helena Mercer called me into her office and told me my designs were derivative, my work ethic questionable, and my future at the company non-existent. Lena's voice was flat, reciting facts. I found out later that she'd heard about me being at that gallery opening with you. Apparently, associating with the Moretti family was bad for the company's image. Victor's hands clenched. She fired you because of me? She fired me because she's a petty, vindictive woman who saw an opportunity to eliminate competition. Lena's smile was bitter. I was naive enough to think talent mattered more than politics. I learned. What happened then? I couldn't pay my rent. My landlord wouldn't negotiate. I moved to a cheaper place, then a cheaper one. Used my savings for doctor's appointments until I ran out. Started working at the diner because they didn't ask questions and paid cash. Lena's voice cracked. And every day I told myself it was temporary, that I'd figure something out, that I just needed to hold on a little longer. Why didn't you reach out to anyone? Because I had no one. The words came out fierce. My parents died when I was 20. I have no siblings, no family. My friends were all connected to the fashion industry, and after Helena Mercer blacklisted me, they disappeared too. So yes, Victor, I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And bringing you into it, bringing your world into my daughter's life, felt like giving up the last bit of control I had. Victor felt something twist in his chest. I would have helped if you'd called and said what? Hi, remember me? The woman you spent one night with? I'm pregnant and jobless and desperate. Can you fix my life? Lena shook her head. I still had some pride left. Barely, but some. Pride doesn't feed a baby. I know that. Lena's voice rose, then dropped again. I know, but it was all I had. Don't you understand? Accepting help from you meant admitting I'd made a mistake. It meant facing the fact that one night of believing in fairy tales had consequences I couldn't handle alone. It wasn't a mistake. Victor's voice was rough. That night, Lena, it wasn't a mistake for me. It was real. It doesn't matter if it was real. Lena met his eyes, and the pain in them was devastating. Because the man I thought you were doesn't exist, and the man you actually are scares me more than poverty ever could. They sat in silence, the beeping of the IV monitor the only sound. Victor felt like he was standing at a crossroads with every path leading somewhere dangerous. Push too hard, and Lena would run again, and next time she'd make sure he couldn't find her. Back off, and she'd continue destroying herself trying to prove she didn't need anyone. I need you to understand something, Victor said finally. My family's business, yes, it exists. Yes, it's complicated. But the violence, the things you read about in those articles, most of it happened before I took control. My father and his generation, they operated differently. They thought fear and force were the only currencies that mattered. And you don't? I think fear and force are tools, sometimes necessary, but not the only ones. Victor chose his words carefully. I've been working for 3 years to transition our operations, to make them legitimate. It's not easy, and it's not clean, but it's happening. Why should I believe you? Because Dr. Chen is still alive. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. Because he called me and told me about you, and in my father's day, that would have been a death sentence for violating your privacy. But I didn't threaten him. I thanked him. Because he did what I've been failing to do for 6 months. He found you. Lena blinked. That's your evidence? That you didn't kill my doctor? It's a start. Victor's lips quirked despite the tension. Lena, I'm not asking you to marry me or move in with me or accept my world without question. I'm asking you to let me help, to let me make sure you and our daughter are safe and healthy. Everything else, we can figure it out as we go. I don't trust you. I know, but maybe you can trust that I want what's best for that baby. Victor nodded toward her stomach. Because regardless of how you feel about me, she's mine too, and I take care of what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice made Lena stiffen. She's not a possession. No, she's my daughter. There's a difference. Victor stood, looking down at Lena with an expression she couldn't quite read. Think about my offer. Dr. Chen says you need rest, proper food, and prenatal care. I can provide all of that. No strings, no expectations beyond you taking care of yourself and the baby. And if I refuse? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll respect your choice. But Lena, if anything happens to you or that baby because you're too stubborn to accept help, I'll never forgive myself. And I don't think you'll forgive yourself either. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said that night at the gallery. About wanting to see you again. About thinking you were someone special. His voice softened. I still think that, even when you're being impossible. He left before Lena could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. She sat in the sudden silence, her hand pressed against her stomach, feeling the baby's movements that had finally returned after the IV had helped stabilize her system. What do I do? She whispered to her daughter. How do I keep you safe when I don't even know what safe means anymore? The baby kicked, strong, insistent, alive, and Lena realized that maybe that was the answer. Maybe keeping her daughter safe meant accepting help from the last person she wanted to depend on. Maybe it meant swallowing her pride and her fear and her certainty that she could handle everything alone. Maybe it meant trusting the man who terrified her more than anything else in her world. Victor found Dr. Chen waiting in the corridor, his expression carefully neutral, but his posture tense. The older man fell into step beside him as they walked toward the exit, away from Lena's room and the conversation that had left Victor feeling like he'd been in a fight he didn't know how to win. How did it go? Chen asked. She thinks I'm trying to control her. Victor's voice was tight. She thinks accepting help means giving up her independence. Is she wrong? Victor stopped walking and turned to face the doctor. I'm trying to keep her alive, to keep my daughter alive. If that's control, then yes, I'm guilty. Mr. Moretti, there's a difference between helping someone and making decisions for them. Chen's tone was gentle but firm. Lena Hart has lost everything in the past 6 months. Her job, her home, her sense of stability. The one thing she still has is agency over her own life. If you take that from her, even with the best intentions, you'll lose her completely. Then what do you suggest? I just stand back and watch her work herself to death? I suggest you give her options instead of ultimatums. Let her choose how to accept help rather than dictating the terms. Chen paused. And maybe start by understanding why she ran in the first place. Really understanding it, not just hearing the words. Victor wanted to argue, but something in Chen's expression stopped him. The doctor had been practicing medicine long enough to recognize patterns, to see past the surface explanations people gave for their choices. She found out about my family, Victor said, about our business. It scared her. And can you blame her? Chen's question was direct. She's a young woman who is already in a vulnerable position. Finding out the man she cared about is connected to organized crime. That would terrify anyone. I'm not my father. I'm not running the business the way he did. But you are still running it. Chen held Victor's gaze. And that means the danger is still there, whether you want to admit it or not. Lena knows that. She's scared not just of you, but of what being connected to you could mean for her child. Victor's jaw clenched. So what am I supposed to do? Walk away? Pretend I don't have a daughter? No. You're supposed to prove to her that her fears are unfounded, or if they're not unfounded, that you're willing to address them. Chen's expression softened slightly. Mr. Moretti, I've been a doctor for nearly 4 decades. I've seen a lot of complicated situations, and I can tell you this, the ones that work out are the ones where people choose each other despite the complications, not because they've eliminated them. She doesn't want to choose me. She doesn't know you well enough to make that choice. All she knows right now is that 6 months ago she thought you were someone safe, and then she found out you weren't. Give her a reason to reconsider. Before Victor could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw Dominic's name. I need to take this. Chen nodded and stepped away, giving him privacy. Victor answered with a curt, What is it? We have a problem. Dominic's voice was low, urgent. Marco just called. There's been chatter. Someone knows you're at Mount Sinai, and they're asking questions about why. Victor's blood went cold. Who? We don't know yet. But boss, if it's the Calabrese family or any of the people who've been waiting for you to show weakness, this could get complicated fast. How much do they know? Just that you're here and that it's personal, but it won't take long for them to figure out the rest. Dominic paused. What do you want me to do? Victor glanced back toward the corridor that led to Lena's room. She was in there right now, vulnerable and scared and carrying his child. If word got out that Victor Moretti had a pregnant woman stashed at Mount Sinai, every enemy he'd ever made would see it as an opportunity. Pull the security team, Victor said. I want eyes on every entrance to this hospital. No one gets to the 4th floor without clearance. And Dominic, do it quietly. I don't want Lena to know. Understood. What about you? I'm staying here until I know she's safe. Victor's tone left no room for argument. And I need you to find out who's asking questions and why. Use whatever resources you need. He ended the call and stood in the sterile hospital corridor, weighing his options. The smart move would be to get Lena out of here, to move her somewhere secure where he could control every variable. But Chen's words echoed in his mind. Give her options, not ultimatums. Let her choose. Except now there might not be time for choices. Victor walked back to exam room 4 and knocked softly before entering. Lena looked up from where she sat on the hospital bed, her expression wary. I thought you left, she said. I need to talk to you about something. Victor closed the door behind him. And I need you to listen without arguing. That's a great start to a conversation. Lena's voice was dry, but he could see the fear flickering in her eyes. Someone knows I'm here. Someone from my world. Victor kept his voice calm, factual. I don't know what they want yet, but I need to make sure you're protected until I do. The color drained from Lena's face. What does that mean? Protected how? I have security positioned around the hospital. They're discreet, but they're there. Victor moved closer to the bed. Lena, I know you don't trust me. I know you think I'm trying to control you, but right now I need you to let me keep you safe. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Lena's voice shook. This is why I ran. Because being near you means being a target. You were already a target the moment you got pregnant with my child. Victor's words were harsh but true. Running didn't change that. It just meant you were vulnerable and alone when the danger found you. And now the danger has found me because of you. No, now the danger has found you because I was careless enough to come to a public hospital without thinking through the consequences. Victor's voice hardened. That's on me. But Lena, whether you like it or not, you're connected to me now. Our daughter connects us. And that means you need protection. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller and more fragile than Victor had ever seen her. I can't do this. I can't live in a world where people are watching me, where every decision is about security and danger. Then help me change that world. Victor sat down in the chair beside her bed. Help me finish what I started 3 years ago. Help me make it so our daughter doesn't have to grow up looking over her shoulder. How am I supposed to do that? I'm just... Lena gestured helplessly at herself. I'm nobody. I have no power, no resources, no way to change anything. You have something more valuable than power or resources. Victor reached out and took her hand, holding it gently when she tried to pull away. You have perspective. You see my world from the outside without all the history and obligation and justifications that cloud my judgment. And you're the mother of my child, which means you have every reason to want that world to be better. Lena stared at their joined hands. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to give me a chance to earn that trust. Victor's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Starting with keeping you safe while we figure out who's asking questions and why. And after that? After that, we take it one day at a time. Victor met her eyes. But Lena, I need you to understand something. I meant what I said before. No strings, no expectations beyond you taking care of yourself and the baby. But I can't protect you if you fight me every step of the way. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need me to do? Right now, stay here. Let the doctors monitor you. Let the IV finish its course. Victor paused. And when you're discharged, let me take you somewhere safe. Somewhere you can rest and heal without worrying about rent or food or whether you'll have a job tomorrow. Your house. A house. Not necessarily mine. Victor had already been thinking about this. I have properties all over the city. Pick one. Anyone. It's yours for as long as you need it. And then what? I just live there like some kept woman while you control every aspect of my life. You live there like the mother of my child who deserves to be comfortable and healthy. Victor's voice was steady. You make your own choices, your own schedule. You see whatever doctors you want. You eat whatever food you want. The only requirement is that you have security nearby in case something happens. Security means guards, means people watching me. Security means you're not alone if someone tries to hurt you. Victor's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Lena, I know this isn't the life you wanted, but it's the reality we're in. And I'd rather have you angry at me for being overprotective than attend your funeral because I wasn't protective enough. The blunt words made Lena flinch. You really think it could come to that? I think there are people in this city who would love to hurt me by hurting the people I care about. Victor's expression was grim. And whether you believe it or not, I care about you. I cared about you 6 months ago, and I care about you now, which means you're vulnerable. Lena pulled her hand away and pressed it against her stomach, where the baby was moving again in gentle waves. She deserves better than this. Better than parents who barely know each other arguing in a hospital room about security threats. She deserves parents who are alive to raise her. Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. My father used to say that the Moretti family survives because we adapt. We don't fight the same wars our grandfathers fought. We don't make the same mistakes. He turned back to face Lena. But the one thing that never changes is that we protect our own. And you and that baby, you're mine to protect now. I don't want to be owned. I'm not talking about ownership, I'm talking about responsibility. Victor's voice softened. Lena, 6 months ago, you made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Like I could be more than my family name. More than the business and the obligations and the weight of all the choices my father made before I was born. And then you were gone, and I thought I'd lost my chance at that. Victor, let me finish. He moved back to the chair, sitting down so they were eye level again. I'm not saying we're going to fall in love and live happily ever after. I'm not that naive, but I am saying that we have a chance here. A chance to build something better than what we each had before. For our daughter, yes. But maybe for us too. Lena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone whose life is so different from everything I know. Then we learned together. Victor reached out and wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. One day at a time. One decision at a time. Starting with you accepting help instead of killing yourself trying to prove you don't need it. It's not about proving anything. It's about... Lena's voice broke. It's about being so tired of being scared. I've been scared for 6 months, Victor. Scared I'd lose my baby. Scared I'd end up on the street. Scared you'd find me and take her away. Scared you wouldn't find me and I'd have to do this completely alone. And now you're here, and I'm still scared because I don't know which version of you is real. They're both real. Victor's voice was rough. The man you met at that gallery, that's who I am when I'm with you. And the man you read about in those articles, that's who I have to be to survive in my world. But Lena, I'm trying to make it so the first version is the only one that matters. And if you can't, if your world won't let you be just one person, then I'll do whatever it takes to keep my family safe from the parts of me that are dangerous. Victor held her gaze, including stepping away if that's what's necessary. Lena stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. What she saw instead was exhaustion that matched her own, and a determination that was almost frightening in its intensity. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, I'll accept your help. I'll go to one of your properties. I'll let you provide security. But Victor, I need you to understand something too. What? I'm doing this for my daughter. Not for you, not for us. For her. Lena's hand pressed protectively against her stomach. And the moment I think your world is more dangerous than facing it alone, I'm gone. I don't care how many resources you have or how many guards you post. I'll disappear, and this time you won't find me. The threat hung in the air between them, and Victor recognized it for what it was. Not manipulation, but a promise. Lena Hart might be exhausted and scared and out of options, but she hadn't lost the core of steel that had made her fight so hard to survive on her own. Understood, Victor said. And Lena, I'm going to make sure that day never comes. Before either of them could say anything else, there was a sharp knock on the door. Dominic entered without waiting for permission, his expression tight. Boss, we need to go, now! Victor was on his feet immediately. What happened? 3 cars just pulled up to the emergency entrance. Calabrese family. They know she's here. Dominic's eyes flicked to Lena, then back to Victor. We have maybe 2 minutes before they reach this floor. Lena's face went white. Who are the Calabrese family? Old enemies. Victor's voice was clipped as he moved to the door. Dominic, where's the security team? Positioned at the elevators and stairwells, but Boss, they're outnumbered, and this is a hospital. We can't start a war here. Victor's mind raced through options. The Calabrese family had been looking for a weakness in his operation for years, ever since he'd refused to partner with them on a smuggling operation that would have brought half the federal government down on both their heads. If they knew about Lena, knew about the baby, they'd use it as leverage. Or worse. We need to move her, Victor said. Is there a service elevator? 2 floors down, but we'd have to get past the main corridor, and that's where they'll be coming from. Then we make a distraction. Victor turned back to Lena, who was staring at both of them with growing terror. Get dressed, now. Whatever clothes you came in wearing, put them on. Victor, what's happening? Lena's voice shook. What's happening is that some very dangerous people just found out you exist, and they're going to try to use you to hurt me. Victor pulled out his phone and started typing a message. So we're leaving, right now, before they get a chance. I can't just leave. The doctor hasn't discharged me. The IV. The IV comes out now, or it comes with you. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Your choice. But we're not staying here. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, summoned by some instinct or hospital grapevine. He took in the scene, Victor's tense posture, Dominic's hand hovering near his jacket where a gun was almost certainly holstered, Lena's terrified expression, and his face tightened. What's going on? Chen demanded. We need to discharge Ms. Hart immediately, Victor said. Medical necessity. The only medical necessity is that she stays on that IV for at least another 4 hours and gets monitored overnight. Chen moved to stand between Victor and Lena. I won't let you endanger her health. You think her health is endangered by the IV coming out early? Victor's voice was hard. Wait until the men heading up here right now get their hands on her. See how endangered her health is then. Chen's eyes widened. You brought danger to my hospital. I brought protection. The danger was always coming. I just didn't realize how fast. Victor's expression was grim. Now you have 2 choices, Doctor. Help me get her out of here safely, or watch what happens when enemies of my family decide to use a pregnant woman as a bargaining chip. For a long moment, Chen didn't move. Then he turned to Lena and said, It's your decision. Stay here under my care, and I'll do everything I can to protect you. Or go with him and accept whatever consequences come. Lena looked between the 2 men, her hand pressed against her stomach. In the distance, she could hear the ping of the elevator arriving on their floor, voices in the hallway getting closer. Her heart hammered against her ribs. If I stay? She asked Chen. What can you actually do to protect me? Chen's silence was answer enough. Lena took a shaking breath and started pulling the IV needle from her arm. Help me get dressed, please. Chen moved immediately, his doctor's training overriding his better judgment. He removed the IV properly, pressed gauze against the insertion point, then handed Lena the plastic bag containing her diner uniform, stained, worn, a reminder of the life she'd been living just hours ago. There's a service corridor, Chen said quietly. Past the nurse's station, 3rd door on the left. It leads to the old freight elevator. They stopped using it for patients years ago, but it still works. Why are you helping? Victor asked. Chen looked at him steadily. Because that baby deserves a chance at life, and she won't get it if her mother dies tonight. He turned to Lena. But Ms. Hart, if you go with him, you need to understand something. You're choosing his world, all of it, the protection and the danger both. I know. Lena's hand shook as she pulled on her uniform pants. I don't have a choice anymore. Everyone has choices, Chen said. Sometimes they're all bad, but they're still choices. The voices in the hallway were closer now. Dominic had his phone out, listening to rapid updates from the security team. They're at the nurse's station, asking questions. We've got maybe 60 seconds. Lena finished dressing, her movements clumsy with fear and exhaustion. Victor took her arm, steadying her, and the contact sent a jolt through both of them. Not attraction, not in this moment, but recognition. They were in this together now, whether either of them wanted it or not. Dr. Chen, Victor said. Thank you. I won't forget this. Make sure she gets proper medical care, Chen replied. Wherever you're taking her, she needs to be monitored. The malnutrition, the stress, it's all risk factors for premature labor. I'll handle it. Victor guided Lena toward the door. Dominic, lead the way. Chen, can you buy us 2 minutes? Chen nodded and walked out into the corridor. Through the partially open door, Lena could hear him greeting someone, his voice taking on the authoritative tone doctors used when dealing with people who didn't belong in their domain. "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but visiting hours are over. If you're looking for someone, you'll need to check with, but we're not visiting." The voice that interrupted was smooth, cultured, and somehow more threatening because of it. "We're looking for someone specific, a woman, young, pregnant, admitted tonight. I'm afraid I can't give out patient information. HIPAA regulations." "Of course, we understand, but perhaps you could make an exception? We're family friends, very concerned." Dominic pulled Lena and Victor through the service corridor, moving quickly but quietly. Behind them, Chen's voice continued its delaying tactic, buying them precious seconds. The service corridor was dimly lit, smelling of industrial cleaner and old paint. At the end, exactly where Chen had said, was a door marked Freight, Authorized Personnel Only. Dominic pushed it open, revealing an ancient freight elevator with accordion doors and a control panel that looked like it predated modern safety regulations. He pressed the call button, and somewhere above them, machinery groaned to life. "How long?" Victor asked. 30 seconds, maybe." Dominic was still listening to his earpiece. "The team is engaging the Calabrese men at the nurses' station. Lots of loud disagreement. Hospital security is getting involved." "Good. That'll slow them down." The elevator arrived with a shudder and a metallic clang. Dominic pulled the doors open manually, and they stepped into a space that was barely large enough for the three of them. Lena's breathing was rapid, her face pale in the harsh overhead light. "Where are we going?" she managed. "Somewhere safe," Victor said. "Somewhere they can't find you." "You said that about the hospital." "I was wrong." Victor's jaw was tight. "I won't be wrong again." The elevator lurched downward, groaning and creaking with every floor. Lena grabbed Victor's arm to steady herself, and he covered her hand with his, the gesture protective and somehow intimate despite the circumstances. "I'm scared," Lena whispered. "I know." Victor pulled her closer, letting her lean against him. "I know, but I've got you now, both of you, and I don't let go of what's mine." The possessiveness that had bothered her before now felt like the only solid thing in a world that had tilted dangerously. Lena closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for this moment, that Victor Moretti could actually keep the promises he was making. The elevator reached the basement with a final shudder. Dominic pulled open the doors, revealing a dimly lit loading area that opened onto an alley. A black SUV was already waiting, engine running, driver alert. "That's our ride," Dominic said. "We go straight to the car. No stopping, no looking back." Victor nodded and guided Lena forward. They moved quickly across the loading dock, down a short ramp, and into the vehicle. Dominic climbed in after them, slamming the door as the driver pulled out before anyone had buckled their seatbelts. As they sped through Manhattan's nighttime streets, Lena looked back once at the hospital receding behind them. Dr. Chen was still in there, dealing with the consequences of helping her escape. Her few possessions were in that storage room apartment she'd never see again. Her life, such as it had been, was disappearing into the rearview mirror. "What happens now?" she asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. Victor was already on his phone, giving orders in a low, clipped voice. When he finished, he turned to her and said, "Now we disappear. And while we're gone, I'm going to find out who told the Calabrese family about you. And then I'm going to make sure they understand that threatening my family was the last mistake they'll ever make." The cold certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it made Lena realize something that changed everything. Victor Moretti wasn't just offering protection. He was offering war. And somewhere in the past few hours, she and her unborn daughter had become the reason for it. She'd run from his world because she was afraid of the violence. Now that violence was being wielded in her defense, and Lena didn't know whether that made her safer or put her in even more danger than before. The SUV cut through Manhattan like a blade, weaving through late-night traffic with practiced precision. Lena sat wedged between Victor and the door, her hand still pressed against her stomach, feeling her daughter's reassuring movements. Outside the tinted windows, the city blurred past, familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign, dangerous in ways she'd never considered during her months of anonymous survival. "Where are we going?" she asked again, needing the answer this time. Victor glanced at Dominic, who was still monitoring his phone, coordinating with people Lena couldn't see. A safe house in Brooklyn. Off the grid, no connection to any of my business properties. The Calabrese family won't know to look there. How long do I have to stay? As long as it takes to neutralize the threat. Victor's voice was matter of fact, as if he were discussing a business arrangement rather than Lena's entire life. A few days? Maybe a week? A week? Lena's voice rose. I can't just disappear for a week. I have a job. She stopped, realizing how hollow the protest sounded. Her job at the diner paid under the table and would replace her within a day. Her apartment was a room she rented month to month from a landlord who'd never asked her name. She had no obligations, no ties, nothing anchoring her to the life she'd built except her own stubborn pride. You don't have anything that's worth dying for, Victor said quietly, reading her thoughts. And that's what we're talking about here, Lena. The Calabrese family doesn't make social calls. If they found out about you, it's because someone told them you're important to me. And the moment you became important to me, you became a target. I didn't ask to be important to you. No, but you are. Because you're carrying my daughter. Victor's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on her stomach. And that makes you the most important person in my world right now. Lena wanted to pull away from his touch, to maintain the distance that felt safer than this dangerous intimacy. But his hand was warm, solid, and her daughter was moving beneath both their palms in gentle waves that felt like a conversation Lena wasn't equipped to translate. This is insane, she whispered. 12 hours ago I was serving coffee at a diner. Now I'm running from mobsters in an SUV with a man I barely know. You know me. Victor's voice was low, meant only for her despite Dominic's presence. Maybe not all of me, but you know the parts that matter. You knew them 6 months ago, and you know them now. I thought I knew you 6 months ago. I was wrong. You weren't wrong about who I am. You were just wrong about what I do. Victor shifted closer, his voice dropping even lower. Lena, I need you to understand something. My business, my family's legacy, yes, it's complicated. Yes, there are parts of it I'm not proud of. But the man who talked to you about art and philosophy at that gallery, the man who made you laugh until your sides hurt, the man who held you like you were precious, that's not a lie. That's who I am when I'm not being who I have to be. And which one are you right now? Victor was quiet for a moment. Right now, I'm both. I'm the man who cares about you and wants to keep you safe. And I'm the man who will do whatever it takes to eliminate threats to my family, even if that means things that would scare you. It already scares me. Lena finally pulled her hand away. Everything about this scares me. The running, the guards, the idea that there are people out there who want to hurt me just because of who you are. Then help me change it. Victor's voice carried an urgency she hadn't heard before. Help me finish what I started, transitioning the business, cutting ties with the dangerous parts of my world. I can't do it overnight, but I can do it, especially now, especially for her. Lena looked down at her stomach, at the curve that held her daughter. What if it's not enough? What if we can't outrun your past? Then we face it together, instead of you facing it alone. Victor reached out and turned her face toward him, forcing her to meet his eyes. Lena, I know I'm asking a lot. I know this isn't the life you wanted, but it's the life we have. And we can either let it destroy us, or we can fight to make it into something better. Before Lena could respond, Dominic's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He read it, his expression darkening. Boss, we have confirmation. The leak came from inside. One of Marco's men has been feeding information to the Calabrese family for the past 3 months. Victor's entire body went rigid. Who? Tony Ferrara. He's been on Marco's crew for 2 years. Nobody suspected. Where's he now? Marco's bringing him in. Wants to know how you want to handle it. Dominic's tone was carefully neutral, but Lena could hear the implication underneath. Victor's jaw clenched. For a long moment he didn't speak, then he said, Tell Marco to hold him until I get there. No permanent damage, but make sure he understands how serious this is. Understood. Dominic started typing a response. Lena felt her stomach turn. What are you going to do to him? What I have to do. Victor's voice was cold in a way that made him sound like a stranger. He betrayed my family. He put you and our daughter in danger. There are consequences for that. You're going to kill him. I'm going to make sure he never betrays anyone again." Victor met her eyes, and what she saw there was harder than anything she'd encountered in 6 months of struggling to survive. "This is the part of my world you don't want to see, Lena. The part where I can't afford to be merciful, because mercy gets interpreted as weakness, and weakness gets people killed. There has to be another way." "What way?" Victor's voice was harsh. "I let him go with a warning, and every other person in my organization learns that betrayal has no real consequences? I turn him over to the police, and he cuts a deal that brings federal investigators down on everyone connected to me? Or I do nothing, and the Calabrese family keeps using him to feed them information until they find another vulnerability to exploit?" Lena wanted to argue, to insist that violence wasn't the answer, but the words died in her throat, because Victor was right, in a terrible way that made her understand just how different his world was from anything she'd experienced. This wasn't about right and wrong in any moral sense she recognized. This was about survival in a context where the rules were written in blood and enforced through fear. "I can't be part of this," she said quietly. "You already are." Victor's expression softened slightly. "The moment you got pregnant with my child, you became part of this. I know it's not fair. I know it's not what you wanted. But Lena, we don't get to choose what we're born into. We only get to choose what we do with it." The SUV turned off the main road, heading into a neighborhood Lena didn't recognize. Brownstones lined the streets, their windows dark at this late hour. It looked residential, quiet, the kind of place where families lived and children played in small yards behind wrought iron fences. "This is your safe house?" Lena asked, surprised. "The best hiding places are the ones that don't look like hiding places." Victor gestured to a nondescript brownstone halfway down the block. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished, stocked kitchen. There's a private obstetrician who'll come by tomorrow morning to check on you and the baby, and security that you won't see but that will keep you safer than Fort Knox. The driver pulled up to the curb, and Dominic was out immediately, scanning the street with professional paranoia. He gave a subtle nod, and Victor opened his door, extending a hand to help Lena out. Her legs were unsteady after the adrenaline and fear of the past hour. Victor caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment they stood on the sidewalk in the pools of streetlight, looking at each other across a divide that felt insurmountable despite their physical proximity. "I need to handle the situation with Ferrara," Victor said, "but I'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, Dominic will be here, and there's a woman named Maria who will help you with anything you need." "You're leaving?" Despite everything, despite her fear and her reservations and her desperate desire for distance, Lena felt panic at the thought of Victor walking away. "I have to. The longer I wait to deal with this, the more danger you're in." Victor's hand moved to her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone in a gesture that was tender and possessive all at once. "But Lena, I promise you, I will come back. And when I do, we're going to figure this out. All of it. The safety, the future, what it means for us to be parents together." "What if you don't come back?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "What if something happens to you?" Victor smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then Dominic has instructions to keep you safe and make sure you and our daughter have everything you need. Financial security, medical care, protection. You'll never have to work in a diner again or worry about rent or wonder where your next meal is coming from." "That's not what I—" Lena stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. That money wasn't what she was worried about. That she was worried about him, about what would happen if he walked into whatever confrontation was waiting and didn't walk back out. When had that shift happened? When had Victor Moretti gone from being the dangerous man she was running from to being someone whose safety mattered to her? "Come on," Victor said, guiding her toward the brownstone's front steps. "Let's get you inside and settled. You need rest more than anything else right now." The interior of the brownstone was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, comfortable without being ostentatious. A woman in her 50s appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. "This must be Lena," she said, her voice warm. "I'm Maria. Welcome. You look exhausted, dear. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" "I don't remember," Lena admitted. "Well, we'll fix that right now. I've got soup on the stove and fresh bread. You'll eat, then sleep, and tomorrow we'll worry about everything else." Maria bustled toward the kitchen, clearly expecting to be followed. Victor caught Lena's hand before she could move. Maria's good people. She's been with my family for 20 years. You can trust her. Can I trust you? Lena asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Victor was quiet for a moment. I don't know if I can be everything you need me to be. I don't know if I can keep all the promises I want to make, but I can promise you this. I will never stop trying. For you, for our daughter. I will never stop trying to be better than what I was born into. He kissed her forehead, the gesture so gentle it made Lena's chest ache, and then he was gone, Dominic following him out into the night. Lena stood in the hallway of a stranger's house, or was it her house now, and felt the weight of everything that had happened crash down on her all at once. Come on, sweetheart, Maria said from the kitchen doorway. Food first, then we'll get you settled. Everything else can wait until morning. Lena followed her into the kitchen, where indeed a pot of soup bubbled on the stove, filling the air with the rich smell of chicken and vegetables and herbs. Maria ladled out a generous portion and set it in front of Lena along with thick slices of bread that were still warm. Eat, Maria commanded. All of it. That baby needs nutrition, and so do you. Lena picked up the spoon with shaking hands and took a bite. The soup was perfect, rich and warming and tasting like comfort in a way she hadn't experienced since before her parents died. She found herself eating with desperate hunger, unable to stop until the bowl was empty and she'd consumed 3 slices of bread. Better? Maria asked, refilling the bowl without being asked. Yes, thank you. Lena looked at the older woman curiously. Victor said you've been with his family for 20 years. That's a long time. It is. I watched that boy grow up, saw him struggle with the weight of being Antonio Moretti's son. Maria settled into the chair across from Lena. His father was a hard man, believed the old ways were the only ways. Victor spent his whole childhood being trained to take over the business, whether he wanted to or not. Did he want to? Maria's expression was thoughtful. I don't think he knew what he wanted until after his father died. Then he had to figure out who Victor Moretti was going to be separate from who Antonio Moretti had been. It's not an easy question when you inherit an empire built on fear and blood. And what did he decide? That he wanted to build something different, something his children could be proud of instead of ashamed of. Maria paused. So when he told me tonight that you were carrying his daughter, I knew this was the push he needed, the reason to finish what he started 3 years ago. Lena set down her spoon. What if I don't want to be his reason? What if I just want a quiet life for my daughter, away from all of this? Then you'll have to decide if that's possible while being connected to Victor Moretti. Maria's voice was gentle but honest. Because, dear, that baby connects you whether you want it or not. And Victor, he's not the kind of man who walks away from his responsibilities, especially not when he cares about someone the way he clearly cares about you. He doesn't know me well enough to care about me. Don't he? Maria smiled. I saw the way he looked at you just now, like you were the only thing in the world that mattered. That's not duty talking, dear. That's something else entirely. Lena finished her second bowl of soup in silence, thinking about Victor's expression when he'd touched her stomach, when he'd promised to come back. There had been something raw in his eyes, something vulnerable that didn't match the cold calculation he'd displayed when discussing the traitor in his organization. Maria showed her to a bedroom on the second floor, spacious and comfortable, with an ensuite bathroom and a closet that someone had already stocked with clothes in Lena's size. Maternity clothes, she realized with a start, soft fabrics and practical designs that looked expensive in a way her diner uniform had never been. How did he know my size? Lena asked. Victor is thorough, Maria said diplomatically. Get some rest, dear. The doctor will be here at 9 tomorrow morning. And if you need anything during the night, I'm in the room next door. Alone in the bedroom, Lena stood at the window looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Victor was dealing with the man who'd betrayed him. Somewhere out there, the Calabrese family was plotting their next move. And somewhere in the midst of all that danger and violence, Lena was supposed to build a life for her daughter. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the baby's movements. What have I gotten us into? She whispered. But she knew the answer. She'd gotten them into exactly what she'd been running from for 6 months. She'd gotten them into Victor Moretti's world with all its complexity and danger and twisted morality. And the terrifying part was that some small piece of her, the piece that remembered how safe she'd felt in his arms, how seen she'd felt when he looked at her, was starting to wonder if maybe that world wasn't as impossible to navigate as she'd thought. Maybe. If Victor could keep his promises, if he could protect them without destroying himself in the process, if she could learn to trust a man whose business was built on secrets and whose protection came with the implicit threat of violence. Too many ifs, too many variables she couldn't control. Lena climbed into bed, exhausted beyond measure, and fell asleep with her hands still pressed protectively over her daughter. Across the city, in a warehouse that had been in the Moretti family for 3 generations, Victor stood in front of a man whose face was already swelling from the beating Marco's crew had administered. Tony Ferrara was 32, had worked for the organization since he was 19, and had just made the fatal mistake of selling information to the enemy. "Why?" Victor asked, his voice deceptively calm. Tony spat blood onto the concrete floor. "They paid better. 3 times what you were giving me to babysit Marco's shipments." "So it was just money?" Victor circled the chair where Tony was tied. "You sold out your family, put a pregnant woman and an unborn child in danger, all for a better paycheck." "Don't give me that family shit," Tony sneered. "This ain't a family, it's a business. Your father understood that. You're too soft to see it." Victor's fist connected with Tony's jaw before the man could brace for it. The impact sent the chair rocking backward, and only Dominic's quick intervention kept it from toppling completely. "My father," Victor said quietly, "would have killed you the moment he found out about the betrayal. Slowly, painfully, and publicly as a message to anyone else who might be thinking about selling us out. But I'm not my father. So I'm going to give you a choice." Tony's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What choice?" "You can tell me everything you told the Calabrese family. Every detail, every piece of information, every plan they're working on. And in exchange, I let you leave the city alive. You disappear, you never come back, and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if I've changed my mind. And if I don't talk," Victor's smile was cold, "then I let Marco and his crew finish what they started. And trust me, Tony, they're not as merciful as I'm being right now." Tony licked his split lip, calculating. "How do I know you won't kill me anyway?" "You don't. But you know for certain what happens if you refuse to cooperate. So you're betting on my word being worth something versus the guarantee that Marco's crew will make sure you never betray anyone again." Victor leaned down, his face level with Tony's. "Choose wisely. My patience is running thin." For a long moment, Tony said nothing. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, I'll talk. But you gotta promise." "I'm promising nothing beyond letting you walk out of here if you tell me everything." Victor straightened. "Start with what the Calabrese family knows about Lena Hart." Tony swallowed hard. "They know she's pregnant. They know she's yours. They know she was at Mount Sinai tonight. What else? They know you've been looking for her for months. They think—" Tony hesitated. "They think she's your weakness, that if they grab her, they can force you into a partnership you've been refusing." Victor's blood ran cold. "Partnership for what?" "The port access. They want to run shipments through your Brooklyn facilities. They've been trying to negotiate for 2 years, but you keep shutting them down." Tony's words came faster now, desperate to prove his usefulness. "Angelo Calabrese thinks if he has leverage, if he has your woman, you'll agree to his terms. And you gave him the information he needed to find that leverage." "I didn't know she was pregnant. I swear, Victor, I didn't know about the baby. They just said they wanted to know if you had any personal connections, anyone who mattered to you. The hospital admission came through our police contacts, and I passed it along, that's all." "That's all," Victor repeated, his voice like ice. "That's all it took to put 2 lives in danger. A pregnant woman and an innocent child who never asked to be part of this world." "I'm sorry," Tony said, but the apology was hollow, self-serving. Victor turned to Dominic. "Get everything else out of him. Names, dates, what operations they're planning, everything. Then put him on a plane to anywhere that's not New York. And make sure our contacts in that city know he's not welcome there if he ever causes trouble." "You're really letting him go?" Marco stepped forward, his expression incredulous. "Boss, he betrayed us. He put your family at risk. And if I kill him, I prove to everyone watching that I'm exactly like my father, that the only currency I understand is violence." Victor's voice was hard. "I'm building something different, Marco. Something where loyalty matters, but where mercy matters too. even for people who don't deserve it. That's going to get you killed, Marco muttered. Maybe, but it might also get me a life worth living. Victor thought of Lena, sleeping in that brownstone under Maria's watchful eye. A life where my daughter doesn't have to grow up ashamed of her father's name. He walked out of the warehouse into the cold night air, leaving Dominic to handle the interrogation. His phone buzzed with updates from the security team at the brownstone. All clear. Lena was asleep. Maria was on watch. Everything was secure, but Victor knew it was temporary. The Calabrese family wouldn't back off just because they'd lost one informant. If anything, Tony's disappearance would confirm that they'd hit a nerve, that Lena mattered enough to make Victor act decisively. They'd come at him again, harder and smarter next time. Which meant Victor needed to end this before it escalated into war. He needed to make Angelo Calabrese understand that pursuing Lena was a fatal mistake, not because Victor would respond with violence, but because Victor was willing to destroy everything, including himself, to keep his family safe. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. It rang twice before a smooth, cultured voice answered. Victor Moretti, this is unexpected. Angelo, Victor said, we need to talk, face to face, tomorrow. About what? About the fact that one of your men put a target on a pregnant woman's back? About the fact that you're trying to use my family as leverage? And about why neither of those things is going to work out the way you think. There was a pause, then Angelo laughed, the sound genuinely amused. You've gotten bold since your father died. He would have just killed the messenger and been done with it. I'm not my father. No, you're softer, weaker, more concerned with appearing civilized than with maintaining respect. Then come see how soft I am, Victor said. Tomorrow, noon, neutral ground, you and me, no crews, no weapons, just two men discussing how to avoid a war neither of us can afford. And if I refuse, then you'll find out just how much of my father I actually inherited. Victor's voice went cold. The woman carrying my child is off limits, Angelo. Completely, permanently off limits. Touch her, threaten her, even think about her too hard, and I will burn your entire organization to the ground. Every shipment, every business front, every ally you've spent decades cultivating. I will dismantle it all, and I will make sure everyone knows it was because you made the mistake of targeting my family. Silence on the other end of the line. Then slowly, Angelo said, The Belmont Hotel, noon. Come alone and I'll do the same. The call ended. Victor stood in the darkness, feeling the weight of the commitment he'd just made. Tomorrow, he'd face one of the most dangerous men in New York's criminal underworld with nothing but his will and his reputation. If it went wrong, he'd start a war that would consume everything he'd built. If it went right, he'd buy Lena and their daughter the safety they desperately needed. Either way, there was no turning back now. Victor arrived at the Belmont Hotel 15 minutes early, a calculated risk that put him in Angelo Calabrese's territory with time to spare. The hotel was old money Manhattan, all marble columns and gilded fixtures, the kind of place where business deals worth millions happened over afternoon tea and no one asked uncomfortable questions. Dominic had argued against the meeting, against going in alone, against trusting that Angelo would honor the terms. But Victor had been firm. This ended today one way or another, and it ended with him showing strength through restraint rather than violence. The hotel's bar was nearly empty at noon on a Wednesday. Victor chose a table in the corner with clear sight lines to all entrances and ordered a coffee he had no intention of drinking. Then he waited, his mind cycling through scenarios and contingencies while his external calm never wavered. Angelo Calabrese arrived precisely at noon, alone as promised. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired and distinguished in a way that made him look like a banker or a professor rather than a man who'd built his empire on smuggling and intimidation. They'd known each other for years, circling in the same dangerous orbit, but this was the first time they'd met face-to-face, without intermediaries or the safety of formal gatherings. "Victor," Angelo said, settling into the chair across from him, "you look tired. The responsibilities of fatherhood already weighing on you?" "Let's skip the pleasantries." Victor's voice was level. "You put a target on a pregnant woman, my woman, carrying my child. I want to know why you thought that was acceptable." Angelo smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "I thought it was strategic. You've been refusing my partnership offers for 2 years. I needed leverage to change your mind." So you decided to threaten an innocent woman and an unborn child. I decided to remind you that everyone has vulnerabilities, even the untouchable Victor Moretti, who's too good for the family business. Angelo leaned back, studying Victor with the calculating gaze of a predator assessing prey. Your father would have understood. He knew that in our world, family is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. My father is dead, and the world he built with him. Victor met Angelo's gaze steadily. I'm offering you one chance to back off. Leave Lena alone. Leave my daughter alone. And we can both continue operating in this city without conflict. And what do I get in exchange for this? Generosity? You get to avoid a war you can't win. Angelo laughed, the sound genuine. Can't win? Victor, I have 3 times your manpower, twice your resources, and connections that go deeper than anything you inherited from Antonio. What exactly makes you think I can't win? Because winning would cost you everything you've built. Victor's voice was quiet, but absolute. You think I don't know about your legitimate businesses? The hotel chain, the construction contracts, the commercial real estate portfolio you've spent 15 years developing. All of it is vulnerable if the wrong people start asking the right questions. You'd bring federal attention down on both of us just to protect one woman? I'd burn this entire city to the ground to protect my family. Victor leaned forward. And that's the difference between you and me, Angelo. You see my restraint as weakness. You think because I'm trying to transition away from my father's methods, I'm soft. But what I am is committed. Committed to building something better, yes, but also committed to destroying anyone who threatens what's mine. Angelo's smile faded. That's quite a speech. It's not a speech, it's a promise. Victor pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Inside, you'll find documentation of every questionable business dealing you've made in the past 5 years. Copies have been delivered to 3 different federal prosecutors with instructions to open them if anything happens to me or my family. So yes, Angelo, you could start a war. You could try to take Lena, use her as leverage, force me into your partnership. But the moment you do, everything you've worked for comes crashing down. Angelo picked up the envelope, his expression darkening as he scanned the contents. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. This is mutually assured destruction. You're threatening to take us both down. No, I'm threatening to take you down while protecting what matters to me. Because unlike you, I'm willing to lose everything except my family. Victor stood. Stay away from Lena Hart. Stay away from my daughter. And we never have this conversation again. That's the deal. And if I refuse? Victor buttoned his jacket, preparing to leave. Then we find out if your empire can survive the kind of scrutiny mine has already weathered. I've spent 3 years cleaning up my father's legacy, Angelo, which means most of my operations can survive federal investigation. Can yours? He walked out without waiting for an answer, his heart pounding, but his stride steady. It was a bluff built on half-truths and calculated risks. Yes, he had documentation on Angelo's operations. Yes, he'd made arrangements with lawyers to ensure that documentation reached the right people if necessary. But he hadn't actually approached any federal prosecutors, and doing so would bring exactly the kind of attention Victor had been working to avoid. Still, Angelo didn't know that. And the uncertainty, the possibility that Victor was crazy enough or desperate enough to actually follow through, would be enough. At least Victor hoped it would be enough. His phone buzzed as he reached the street, Dominic's number. Tell me you didn't just declare war on the Calabrese family, Dominic said without preamble. I didn't. I declared peace. On my terms. Victor climbed into the waiting car. Take me to the brownstone. I need to see Lena. Boss, Marco's been calling. He wants to know what's happening with, tell Marco I'll deal with business tomorrow. Today is about making sure my family is safe. Victor ended the call and leaned back against the seat, feeling the exhaustion of the past 24 hours crash down on him. He'd faced enemies before. He'd navigated power struggles and territorial disputes, and the constant pressure of maintaining his position in a world that rewarded violence and punished weakness. But this, protecting Lena and their unborn daughter, felt different, more important than any business deal or strategic alliance, more real than anything he'd experienced since his father died and left him an empire he didn't want. The brownstone looked peaceful in the afternoon light. Victor let himself in with the key he'd had made years ago, back when this property was just another safe house in his network. Now it held the most precious thing in his world. Maria met him in the hallway, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "She's been asking about you. The doctor came this morning, said both mother and baby are stable, but she needs complete rest for at least a week." "Where is she?" "Upstairs in the bedroom. She ate a good breakfast, had a shower, and has been reading the pregnancy books I found for her." Maria paused. "Victor, she's scared. Trying to hide it, but scared nonetheless." "I know." Victor headed for the stairs. "Thank you, Maria, for taking care of her." "That's what family does," Maria said simply. Victor knocked softly on the bedroom door before entering. Lena was sitting up in bed, her hair still damp from the shower, wearing one of the maternity dresses someone had stocked in the closet. She looked healthier than she had last night, color in her cheeks, the exhaustion in her eyes slightly less pronounced. But when she saw him, her expression shuddered. "You came back," she said. "I promised I would." Victor closed the door and moved to sit in the chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Physically? Better than I have in months. The doctor said the baby is fine, that my iron levels are improving, that if I keep eating properly and resting, there's no reason I can't carry to full term." Lena paused. "Emotionally, I don't even know where to start." "Start with what you're feeling right now." Lena looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "I'm angry. At you for dragging me into this. At myself for getting involved with you in the first place. At the world for being so complicated that a woman can't just have a baby in peace without worrying about mobsters and threats and—" Her voice broke. "And I'm scared, Victor. Terrified that this is my life now. That I'll never be free of the danger, that my daughter will grow up knowing her father is someone people fear." "She'll grow up knowing her father would do anything to protect her," Victor said quietly. "That he fought to give her a better world than the one he inherited." "Did you fight for a better world?" Lena met his eyes. "Or did you just threaten more violence to keep us safe?" Victor was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I met with Angelo Calabrese this morning, face to face, no intermediaries. And I made it clear that you and our daughter are completely off limits, that pursuing you would cost him everything he's built." "How did you make it clear?" "With information and leverage, with the promise that attacking my family would bring consequences he couldn't afford." Victor held her gaze. "Not with violence, Lena, with strategy, with the understanding that sometimes the strongest move is the one that doesn't require bloodshed." "And he believed you?" "He believed I was willing to follow through, which is all that matters in my world." Victor reached out and took her hand. "The threat is neutralized. Angelo won't come after you. His organization won't be a problem. And I've made it known throughout the city that you're under my protection, permanently." Lena pulled her hand away. "I don't want to be under anyone's protection. I want to be free. Freedom is an illusion when you're struggling to survive." Victor's voice was gentle but firm. 6 months of freedom nearly killed you and our daughter. So maybe what you want isn't freedom. Maybe it's security with dignity, safety without giving up who you are. And you think you can give me that? I know I can, if you let me." Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. "Lena, I'm not asking you to marry me or move in with me or accept my world without question. I'm asking you to let me provide for you and our daughter, to let me ensure you never have to choose between pride and survival again." "In exchange for what?" Victor turned to face her. "In exchange for a chance to prove I can be the man you thought I was that night at the gallery. A chance to be a real father to our daughter instead of just a source of financial support. A chance for us to figure out if what we felt 6 months ago was real or just a beautiful mistake." Lena's eyes glistened with tears. "I don't know if I can trust you." "Then don't. Not yet." Victor moved back to the chair, sitting down so they were eye level. "But stay here. Rest. Let yourself heal. Let me show you through actions instead of words that I mean what I say. And at the end of it, if you still want to walk away, I'll help you do it. I'll set you up with everything you need to build a life separate from me. No strings, no conditions, just the financial security you and our daughter deserve." "Why would you do that, if I'm just going to leave anyway?" "Because our daughter deserves a mother who's healthy and happy, And because Victor paused, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. Because 6 months ago, you looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, like I could be more than my father's son, more than the legacy I inherited. And for a few hours I believed it. I believed I could be the man you saw when you looked at me. Victor, let me finish. He took a breath. When you disappeared, I thought I'd lost my one chance at that, at being someone different, someone better. And then I found out about the baby, and I realized I'd been given another chance, maybe the last chance I'll ever get. So no, Lena, I'm not doing this because I expect you to stay. I'm doing it because I need to prove to myself that I can be the man my daughter deserves as a father, whether you're part of that future or not. The silence that followed was heavy with everything they weren't saying. Lena wiped at her eyes, then placed both hands on her stomach where their daughter was moving. She's active today, Lena said softly. The doctor said that's a good sign, that she's healthy and strong. Can I? Victor hesitated. Can I feel? Lena nodded, and Victor moved to sit on the edge of the bed. She guided his hand to the spot where the movements were strongest, and for a moment they both sat very still, feeling their daughter's life pulsing beneath their joined hands. That's amazing, Victor whispered. It's the most terrifying and wonderful thing I've ever experienced. Lena's voice was thick with emotion. Knowing there's a person in there, a whole person with her own personality and future and dreams we haven't even imagined yet. What do you dream for her? Lena was quiet for a long moment. I dream she grows up safe, that she never has to be afraid the way I've been afraid, that she has choices I didn't have, opportunities to be whoever she wants to be. She paused. And I dream she has a father who loves her, really loves her, not just as an obligation or a legacy, but as a person he wants to know. She will. Victor's voice was absolute. I promise you, Lena, she will have that. Even if you and I can't make it work, even if you decide to walk away, I will be the father she deserves. I will love her and protect her and give her every opportunity to become whoever she wants to be. Lena turned to look at him, really look at him, and something in her expression shifted. I want to believe you. More than anything, I want to believe you. Then give me time to prove it. Victor's hand was still on her stomach, still feeling their daughter's movements. Stay here. Rest. Heal. And let me show you that the man you met at that gallery is real, that he's not just a mask I wear when it's convenient. And what about your business? Your family's legacy? All the complicated, dangerous parts of your world that scared me away in the first place? I'm working on it. The transition I started 3 years ago. It's happening. Slowly, but happening. In another year, maybe 2, the Moretti name will be associated with legitimate business interests, not criminal enterprise. Victor met her eyes. I'm doing it for our daughter, so she can grow up proud of her name instead of ashamed of it. That's a big promise. It's the only one that matters. Victor stood, knowing he was pushing his luck but needing her to understand. Lena, I can't erase my past. I can't change the fact that my father built an empire on fear and violence. But I can build a different future. For our daughter, for you if you'll let me, and for myself. Because I'm tired of being Antonio Moretti's son. I want to be Sophia's father instead. Sophia. Lena's breath caught. You want to name her Sophia? It was my grandmother's name. She was the only person in my family who ever told me I could choose to be different. That I didn't have to follow in my father's footsteps just because I was born into them. Victor smiled slightly. But if you hate it, we can pick something else. This is your decision too. Sophia, Lena repeated, testing the name. Sophia Moretti. She looked down at her stomach. What do you think, baby girl? Do you like that name? As if in answer, the baby kicked hard enough that Victor felt it against his palm. Lena laughed, the sound surprised and genuine, and for a moment the fear and uncertainty faded from her expression. I think she approves, Lena said. Then Sophia it is. Victor moved toward the door, giving her space. I'll let you rest. Maria will bring you lunch, and the doctor wants to check on you again tomorrow morning. Victor, wait. Lena's voice stopped him at the threshold. Thank you. For keeping your promise, for coming back. I'll always come back, Victor said simply. No matter what happens between us, I'll always come back for you and Sophia. He left before the emotion in her eyes could undo him completely. Downstairs, Maria was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and Dominic was positioned by the front window, his vigilance never wavering. "How is she?" Maria asked. "Better, stronger." Victor accepted the coffee Maria handed him, and terrified but trying not to show it, "She'll come around. That girl has steel in her spine, even if she doesn't always see it." Maria returned to chopping vegetables. "And you, Victor? How are you holding up?" "I'm doing what needs to be done." Victor moved to look out the kitchen window at the small garden behind the brownstone. "Making promises I'm not sure I can keep, fighting battles I might not win, trying to be someone I've never been before." "Your grandmother would be proud," Maria said quietly. "She always believed you were meant for more than what your father had planned." "I hope she was right." Victor finished his coffee and set the mug down. "Because right now, I'm betting everything on the chance that I can be the man Lena and Sophia deserve. And if I'm wrong—" "You're not wrong," Maria interrupted. "I've known you since you were a boy, Victor. I've seen you struggle with your father's expectations, watched you try to find your own path. And I've never seen you as committed to anything as you are to making this work." Victor wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that determination and love would be enough to overcome the weight of his family's history. But he'd lived in his world long enough to know that sometimes, no matter how hard you fought, the past won anyway. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Lena spent her time resting, eating the nutritious meals Maria prepared, seeing the doctor regularly, and slowly regaining the strength she'd lost during her months of struggle. Victor came by every day, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to sit with her and talk about everything except the complicated reality of their situation. They talked about Sophia, about nursery colors and baby names, and the thousand small decisions that came with preparing for a child. They talked about Lena's love of fashion design, about the career she'd lost and whether she might want to return to it someday. They talked about Victor's efforts to transition his business, about the legitimate ventures he was building and the old operations he was slowly shutting down. What they didn't talk about was the future, about what would happen after Sophia was born, whether Lena would stay or leave, whether the fragile connection growing between them could survive the reality of Victor's world. Until one evening, 3 weeks after Lena had moved into the brownstone, when she was 6 months pregnant and glowing with health that made the past seem like a nightmare she'd barely survived. They were sitting in the garden, the late October air cool but not yet cold, when Lena said, "I've been thinking about what happens after Sophia is born." Victor, who'd been reading a report on his tablet, set it aside. And I realized I don't know what I want. For the first time in 6 months, I'm not just fighting to survive. I have space to think, to plan, to consider what kind of life I want to build. Lena looked at him. "But I still don't know if that life includes you." The honesty hurt, but Victor appreciated it more than false reassurances. "What would help you decide?" "The truth. About your business, about the transition you keep mentioning, about what your life actually looks like when I'm not here." Lena's voice was steady. "I need to understand what I'd be signing up for if I stayed. Not the sanitized version you think I want to hear, but the real complicated truth." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "All right, the truth. My family's business for 3 generations has been built on importing goods that aren't exactly legal. Drugs in my grandfather's time, which my father moved away from. Weapons and smuggled merchandise in my father's time. And now—" He paused. "Now I'm trying to shut it all down. Every illegal operation, every questionable partnership, everything that could put my family at risk." "How's that going?" "Slowly. Some of the old guard resist. They see it as betraying my father's legacy. But I've been firm. In another year, 18 months at most, the Moretti organization will be completely legitimate. Import-export of legal goods, commercial real estate, investments in legitimate businesses." Victor met her eyes. "But until then, yes, there's still risk. There are still people who see me as my father's son, still enemies who would love to exploit any weakness." "Like me and Sophia." "Like you and Sophia," Victor agreed. "Which is why the security, why the caution, why I can't just walk away from the protective measures even though I know they make you uncomfortable." Lena absorbed this in silence. Then she asked, "What happens if you can't complete the transition? If the old guard wins, or if the business can't survive going legitimate?" "Then I walk away. I hand it over to my brothers, or to Marco, or to whoever wants the burden of running it, and I focus on building something new from scratch." Victor's voice was firm. Because, Lena, I meant what I said. Sophia deserves a father she can be proud of, and I can't be that father while running the kind of organization my grandfather and father built. You'd really give it all up? The power, the wealth, the legacy? In a heartbeat. If that's what it takes to give my daughter a normal life. Victor leaned forward. But I'd rather not have to. I'd rather transform what I inherited into something worth keeping. Something that honors the legitimate parts of my family's history while leaving behind the violence and criminality. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Victor reached out and took her hand. Lena, I know I can't erase the past 6 months. I can't give you back the job you lost, or the apartment you had to leave, or the sense of security you sacrificed when you ran from me. But I can give you a future, one where you and Sophia are safe, where you have choices instead of just survival, where being connected to me is an asset instead of a liability. And what do you get out of this future? Victor smiled slightly. I get to be Sophia's father. I get to watch her grow up, to teach her things, to be part of her life in ways my father never was part of mine. And maybe, if you decide you can trust me, I get to build something with you. Not just for Sophia, but for us. Lena's hand tightened around his. I'm starting to trust you. That's what scares me most. Because if I trust you and you let me down, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt Sophia too. Then I won't let you down. Victor's voice was absolute. I promise you, Lena, I will do everything in my power to be the man you both deserve. And on the days I fall short, I'll keep trying until I get it right. They sat in the garden as the light faded, holding hands, feeling Sophia move between them, and for the first time since that night at the gallery, both of them let themselves believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation could work. 2 months later, on a cold December night, Lena went into labor 3 weeks early. The contractions started just after midnight, hard and fast, giving them barely enough time to get to the hospital Victor had carefully chosen, the one with the best maternity ward, the most experienced doctors, and security measures that would make Fort Knox look casual. Through 16 hours of labor, Victor never left her side. He held her hand through the contractions, brought her ice chips when she needed them, let her squeeze his fingers until he lost feeling, and whispered encouragement when the pain became overwhelming. You're doing amazing, he told her during a particularly brutal contraction. Just breathe, you've got this. Easy for you to say, Lena gasped. You're not the one being torn apart from the inside. I know. And if I could take this pain for you, I would in a heartbeat. Lena looked at him through her exhausted tears and saw the truth in his eyes. He meant it. This man who'd built his life on being untouchable, on maintaining control no matter what, would have traded places with her without hesitation. Tell me something, she said as the contraction eased. Tell me something true about you that I don't know. Victor brushed the sweat-dampened hair from her forehead. I've been terrified every single day since I found out about Sophia. Terrified I wouldn't find you in time, terrified I'd fail to protect you, terrified I'd turn out to be exactly like my father, despite all my efforts to be different. But the most terrifying thing of all has been realizing that I'm in love with you, that somewhere between that first night and now, you became more important to me than anything I've ever fought for or built or inherited. Lena's breath caught. And this time it had nothing to do with contractions. Victor, you don't have to say anything back. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. He kissed her forehead gently. I love you, Lena Hart, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Before Lena could respond, another contraction hit, stronger than before. The medical team sprang into action, and suddenly there was no time for declarations or emotions, only the primal work of bringing new life into the world. Sophia Moretti was born at 4:47 p.m. on December 15th, weighing 6 pounds 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. The moment the doctor placed her in Lena's arms, everything else fell away. The fear, the uncertainty, the complicated history that had brought them to this moment. She's perfect, Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's absolutely perfect. Victor stood beside the bed, looking down at his daughter with an expression of such raw wonder that it transformed his entire face. When Sophia wrapped her tiny hand around his finger, he made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Hey there, Sophia, he said softly. I'm your dad, and I promise you I'm going to spend every day of my life making sure you have everything you deserve. Love, safety, opportunities, and a father who shows up. Always. Lena watched him with their daughter and felt something shift inside her chest. This was real. Not the fairy tale from the gallery opening, not the nightmare of the past 6 months, but something more complicated and precious and terrifying. This was family. Victor, she said, and when he looked at her, she saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. I love you too. I've been fighting it, telling myself it was just hormones or gratitude or fear making me feel this way. But it's not. It's love. Complicated, messy, sometimes inconvenient love, but love nonetheless. Victor's expression transformed. He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and reverent, while Sophia made soft baby sounds between them. So what happens now? Lena asked when they broke apart. Now we figure it out together. Victor settled into the chair beside her bed, never taking his eyes off Sophia. One day at a time, one decision at a time, but together, as a family. A very unconventional family, Lena pointed out. The best ones usually are. Over the next few weeks, as they brought Sophia home to the brownstone and navigated the chaos of new parenthood, Lena and Victor found their rhythm. Night feedings became opportunities for quiet conversations. Diaper changes turned into debates about parenting philosophy. And slowly, carefully, they built something neither of them had expected. A real partnership based on trust and love and shared commitment to giving their daughter the best possible life. Victor kept his promises. By the time Sophia was 6 months old, he'd completed the transition of his business operations. The last of the illegal ventures were shut down, the questionable partnerships dissolved, and the Moretti organization emerged as a legitimate import-export company with diversified holdings in real estate and technology. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't bloodless, but it was done. The day the final paperwork cleared, Victor came home and found Lena in the nursery, reading to Sophia from a picture book about brave little girls who changed the world. It's finished, he said from the doorway. Completely legitimate, fully legal, nothing that could come back to haunt us or her. Lena looked up. Sophia balanced on her hip. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. Victor moved to wrap his arms around both of them. You gave me a reason to be better. Both of you did. So what now? Lena asked. Now that you're just a boring, legitimate businessman? Victor grinned. Now I ask you properly. Lena Hart, will you marry me? Not because of security or because it makes sense for Sophia, but because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life building a future with you? Lena pretended to consider, even though her answer had been yes from the moment he'd held her hand through labor and promised to never let her down. On one condition. Name it. I get to design my own wedding dress, and I'm going back to work. Maria already agreed to watch Sophia, and I've been sketching designs again. I want my career back, Victor. My identity as more than just Sophia's mother or your wife. Done. Anything else? Just one more thing. Lena smiled and kissed him softly. Promise me that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when Sophia asks us how we met, we'll tell her the truth. Not the sanitized version, but the real story. How her mother was terrified and running, and her father was trying to be better than his past, and somehow they found each other anyway. I promise, Victor said, every complicated, messy, imperfect detail. They married in the spring, in the same gallery where they'd first met. The guest list was small: Maria, Dominic, Dr. Chen, who'd started it all with one phone call, and a handful of close friends who'd supported them through the chaos. Lena wore a dress of her own design, elegant and simple, with Sophia in a miniature matching outfit that made everyone cry. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Dominic joked that he objected to not being best man, and the laughter that followed felt like permission to leave the darkness behind and embrace the future they'd fought so hard to build. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask questions, they kept their promise. They told her about the gallery opening, about the fear that made her mother run, about the hospital and the brownstone, and the dangerous men who'd tried to use her as leverage. They told her about the transition, about choosing to be better, about love that grew from impossible circumstances. And Sophia, who inherited her father's determination and her mother's fierce independence, understood. She grew up proud of her name, proud of parents who'd fought to give her a better world, and determined to continue building on the foundation they'd created. The Moretti Foundation, established when Sophia was 2, became Lena's passion project. Using Victor's resources and Lena's vision, they created programs to help struggling single mothers, to provide job training and childcare, and the kind of support Lena had desperately needed during those dark months. It grew into one of New York's most respected charitable organizations, transforming the Moretti name from one associated with shadows and danger into one connected with hope and second chances. Victor often said that saving Lena had saved him, that finding her in that hospital bed had given him the courage to finally become the man his grandmother had believed he could be. And Lena, watching him with Sophia, teaching her to ride a bike, helping with homework, showing her that strength could be gentle and power could be used for good, knew that the terrified woman who'd collapsed in that diner couldn't have imagined this future. But she was grateful every day that she'd been brave enough to accept it. On Sophia's 10th birthday, as they sat in the garden of the brownstone that had become their family home, Victor pulled Lena close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For running. For hiding. For being so stubborn that it took me 6 months to find you." Victor smiled. "Because if you hadn't been all those things, we might have had an easier path. But we wouldn't have had this one. And this one, messy and complicated and sometimes impossible, this one gave us everything that matters." Lena looked at their daughter, playing in the garden with the fierce joy of a child who'd never known fear or want or uncertainty. And she looked at Victor, the dangerous man who'd chosen love over legacy, who'd transformed himself for a family he'd never expected to have. "You're right," Lena said, leaning into his embrace. "This path gave us everything, including each other." And in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by the life they'd built from the ruins of their pasts, Lena Hart and Victor Moretti held each other and their daughter close, knowing that the hardest battles had already been won. Not with violence or force or the weight of inherited power, but with love and commitment and the daily choice to be better than the darkness that had tried to claim them. Their story had started with a fall, Lena's collapse, Victor's descent into desperation. But it had become something else entirely, a rise, a transformation, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most broken pieces can be forged into something stronger than anything that came before. And Sophia, growing up surrounded by that love and strength and determination, would carry that legacy forward, not as a burden, but as a gift. The gift of parents who'd fought for her before she was born and who'd keep fighting for her every day after. The gift of a name that meant redemption instead of shame. The gift of a future built on hope instead of fear. That was the real story. Not the one of danger and shadows, but the one of love triumphing over impossible odds. And it was the only story that mattered.